Hello, and welcome to Life Diaries, a space where the pages of life open up, one story at a time. These are tales written by experience, spoken from the heart. Take a moment for yourself, and let's begin. 25 years of married life fell in the middle of the week. There was a restaurant, gifts, lots of flowers, and, of course, guests. Although they only wanted to gather the closest people, the list still amounted to almost 30. Anastasia twirled in front of the mirror in a new outfit. She still looked wonderful. She was a little over 40, but seemed younger, slim, knew how to dress tastefully, and carried herself with dignity. She was a real find for a successful man and a loving spouse. Matthew, with his eternal busyness, had completely stopped going to the gym and pool with her. He had gained weight, become more ponderous in his movements and conversations, but for her, he remained sweet, dear, beloved. Whatever he was like, he disappeared at his work for days on end. She had almost forgotten the last time they had dinner out or went to the theater. Her husband would just joke it off, saying that business wouldn't wait, and he had no time for idle pastimes. He was completely absorbed in his work. Anastasia combined a passion for painting and flowers. Design comes in various forms, but her creations on paper and in the garden were always dedicated to flowering plants. For this reason, she often worked together with her friend, Ellie. Ellie was passionate about creating stone and wooden elements in the landscaping of country plots, and Anastasia would add tenderness to them, turning bridges, gazebos, and fountains into exotic flower beds. She knew how to combine seemingly completely incompatible things. She affectionately teased her husband, calling him my Iron Man, my Smith. These nicknames were related to his work in primary metal processing. In her imagination, he took red-hot mass and turned it into rough blanks, which then became raw material for industry. She never delved into these production intricacies. Her father, Constantine, had become a metallurgist in his time, and then somehow ended up heading a large enterprise. Well, that was fine. Why should she bother her head with it? Even her mother couldn't stand it, divorced her father, and moved very far away with a new husband. Her daughter took after her with her craving for creativity. Her mother wrote poetry, and the harsh reality of production didn't mesh with lyricism. She had to leave while such an elevated man was calling. And a teenage girl with such a strong father wouldn't be lost. She would grow into a decent person. Theoretically, her father had almost no time for raising a child, but he loved his daughter selflessly, devotedly, passionately. He pushed all other women aside, abandoning attempts to start a new family. There were just the two of them, him and his daughter. Every free moment he dedicated to her, and he laid his heart and soul at her feet from the moment she was born. He swaddled, bathed, and played with her, adoring her sweet scent. That's why his wife quite rightly decided that their daughter would be better off with her father. He raised the girl, didn't break down, and didn't even hold a grudge against his ex-wife. He was glad she had shown her true nature earlier, not in old age when loyalty is tested. Life went on. His daughter was always curious if her father, such a prominent and attractive man, really wasn't seeing anyone. Although they were true friends and could talk about anything, this topic seemed forbidden to her. There were never any external signs of any romances. If you were to describe the daughter's life before marriage in one word, prosperous, heartfelt, would fit. The girl never felt deprived because she grew up without a mother. Her father was everything to her universe. Encouraging her passion for drawing, when she grew older, he bought a country plot where his daughter could experiment with lawns and flower beds. Let her pursue it. For a woman, it's a beautiful and not foolish occupation, he thought. Seeing that his daughter wasn't going to abandon her passion, her father sent her to study at a specialized institute. Before that, he had her sit with his specialists so she could learn to work with special software for design projects. This skill not only helped her in her studies, but also led to her marriage. Initially, she was just settling in. She and her father hadn't yet rented her a separate place, and for a while, she lived in a student dormitory. She handled computer matters at the nearest cafe. She would come in, order a large cup of coffee, some cookies, and immerse herself in her ideas, arranging virtual flowers on the territory of a hypothetical object. There were several dormitories nearby, including one from a technical university. The crowd in the cafe was diverse, mostly young people. That's how the future designer, passionate about vegetation, and the future metal specialist, with a passion for ores and alloys, met. At their first meeting, the girl felt something familiar in him, like in her own father. It was a fateful encounter. Things just clicked for them right away, and it became clear that both were serious about the relationship. For the long summer holidays, they traveled to the girl's hometown. There, her father organized an excursion to the metallurgical plant for the young man. His eyes lit up at what he saw. No other entertainment or romance interested him as much as that production. While the guest was in the shower, the father and daughter talked for a bit. "I think your friend isn't shallow. He'll make a good specialist," the man said. "Dad, he's just as serious about me as he is about his work. Maybe even about our future together. I'm pregnant. We've been living together for the past 2 months. He doesn't know yet. It was important for me to hear your opinion." "What can I say, daughter? I wouldn't want my grandson or granddaughter to grow up in an incomplete family like you did. You shouldn't delay talking to him. The fact that you're both only 19 is not bad. You'll still be very young when the child is on their feet. You'll have time to be with them and live for yourselves when they grow up. And for now, I'll help you financially and morally. I'll support you in the city so you can both continue your studies. I'll hire you helpers, a nanny and a housekeeper. Just don't do anything foolish. Don't even think about postponing the baby's birth. It's risky for your health and will be a serious test for your relationship." Matthew was over the moon with happiness when he learned about his beloved's pregnancy. Fates and love stories vary. For them, everything went so smoothly, comfortably, and warmly from the very beginning that their story could be included in a textbook of family idols. Everything worked out wonderfully for them. They had been together for 25 years, and they themselves were only 45. They had walked hand in hand through such a varied but very happy life. They had raised 2 sons almost to adulthood. People usually say about such couples, they are 2 halves of a whole. When the guests raised their glasses at their silver wedding anniversary, they sincerely praised the family. Anastasia twirled a little more in front of the mirror, smiling at herself. She was beautiful, unadorned, beautiful. And her husband was just right too. She became a little sad. What a pity her father hadn't lived to see this celebration. He would have been happy for them, for their sons. The sons, however, weren't in a hurry to get married yet. They argued that they hadn't met their other halves yet, for everything to be as perfect as it was for their parents. They asked not to grumble about not getting grandchildren, saying everything had its time. After graduating from their institutes, they didn't stay in the capital. Why would they need that eternal hustle and bustle? The young woman's father was glad to get a professional assistant at the enterprise. For a couple of years, he watched how his son-in-law handled tasks, and then immediately made him his deputy. He built a house for his daughter, son-in-law, and their already 2 sons. The boys were born almost a year apart, and the parents decided that since heaven was sending them a second child so early, so be it. The wife's father fell ill not long ago, but immediately seriously. An examination revealed diabetes, which meant a completely different lifestyle. No indulgence with sweets and fats, a strict diet, constant blood sugar monitoring. His daughter couldn't believe her eyes and ears. Her sensible, educated father turned into a stubborn boy when dealing with doctors. No respect for authority, no discipline, no obedience, no timely injections. He did whatever he wanted, as if the illness had robbed him of his mind. As if in punishment for his protests, the disease gripped him with a death-like hold. After another incident with insulin, which he negligently failed to inject on time, he fell into a diabetic coma. He was alone at home. By the time his daughter rushed over, worried that he wasn't answering his phone, time had been lost. Neither money, nor his son-in-law's connections, nor his daughter's frantic efforts with doctors could save the head of the enterprise. Vital bodily functions could not be restored. At the moment of her father's passing, the woman felt as though her life had stopped. But her husband was by her side, her hope, her support, her rock. She survived, learned to smile and enjoy life again. Now they stood with Ellie in the ladies' room of the restaurant, having come for the anniversary. Ellie joked that everyone else was just folks, but they were so beautiful. She said the dress suited Anastasia very well, and the turquoise color wonderfully matched her eyes. But another guest in a pink suit, according to Ellie, looked too full-figured. Both women had finished powdering and applying makeup. Ellie said she had witnessed a strange scene. The banquet had been going on for a couple of hours, and a smoking break was announced. Matthew immediately darted off to the side while everyone was dispersing from the table. Ellie's bag was on the windowsill nearby, and she reached for her lipstick, involuntarily overhearing a snippet of conversation. "With you. You know the reason." At that moment, his gaze fell on her. He stopped short, finished in a businesslike tone. "We'll resolve all document issues tomorrow. I need to go." Ellie was silent for a second, then added, "Somehow, this strange dialogue smells very strongly of an affair on the side. Or am I mistaken?" She forced a laugh, but it was clear the conversation wasn't easy for her. Finally, she added, "However, we're all under the influence of wine right now. You should keep an eye on your faithful husband. Maybe my story is the product of a sick imagination of a woman who stopped believing in great love after 3 divorces." For Anastasia, this did not pass unnoticed. She became wary, turning entirely into a keen gaze and sharp hearing. Before, she and her husband had unconditionally trusted each other, being careful with each other's personal space. It never occurred to them to rummage through each other's phones or computers, or even the car's glove compartment. It was an unspoken taboo that had formed naturally. She tried to convince herself that Ellie had imagined it, that her husband hadn't said affectionate words, that Ellie had misheard. He never used diminutive nicknames at home, calling her affectionately, "my Annie bug." It wasn't that they were against such endearments, it just hadn't stuck between them from the beginning. At home, her husband behaved impeccably. If he was just playing the role of an exemplary husband, he would deserve an Oscar from the Film Academy. After the noisy anniversary party, he returned completely to work. He came home late at night. But he had been on this schedule for about 10 years. Could he have been cheating on her and fooling her for so long? He would have definitely slipped up on something. But here, everything was as usual, nothing to find fault with. She thought about how the plants would behave after planting. She still didn't suspect that the seeds of doubt were also actively sprouting. The worm inside wasn't burrowing in the earth. It was tormenting her. She fought with herself, asking her patience, "Will I dare to look through my husband's phone? Or is it better not to open this Pandora's box?" Her intuition was silent, unwilling to answer. After several days, when contradictions tore her soul to shreds, the woman could no longer bear this torment. Late at night, she pulled his phone from under his pillow and locked herself in the bathroom with it. Let come what may, even if he wakes up. What is meant to be, will be. The contact list on the phone was extensive. She scrolled through it, peering at the names and faces in the avatars. She knew almost all these people, either closely or casually. Except for someone's initials, LVN, instead of an image in the small window, and a photo of an orchid. She was a specialist in her field and wouldn't have mistaken that flower for anything else. She pressed the call button automatically. Now, even a dozen strong men couldn't have restrained the impulse of her fingers. Her nerves were on edge. The reserve of strength in her war with the unknown had run out. The call at 3 a.m. was unexpectedly answered by a clear, very girlish voice. "Kitten, did you miss me? I'm still awake, watching a series. What about your old lady? Is she not home right now, and you decided to call?" She sank onto the cold bathroom tile floor. This blow was below the belt. Old lady, that she understood, was her. And Kitten, her husband. She hadn't noticed anything, but the family boat, it turned out, had already developed a deep crack. On one side, this crack was smoothed over by her naivety. On the other, by her trust in the person closest to her. She surveyed the spacious room. Black spots swam before her eyes. A minute ago, her reliable universe had collapsed. There was no need now to keep a straight face, wet with tears trying to wash away the traces of bitter betrayal. Nothing would ever be the same. There was no more perfect family, which had just celebrated its silver anniversary. How painful, unbearable. She stumbled into the bedroom, where her chosen one, her beloved man, was still sleeping peacefully, not yet knowing that his life had drastically changed. His wife was the kind of person who, loving with all her heart, would never forgive infidelity. How many suitors had tried to court her during 25 years of marriage? She sharply rejected all attempts, explaining that she was married to the most wonderful man in the world and would never trade him. She lay down in bed next to her husband with great difficulty. The resentment was endless, the wound bleeding. Now he was repulsive to her. A thought persistently buzzed in her head. I wonder whose idea it was to call me old lady. His or his paramour's? Ah, what did it matter? She didn't know how old the owner of the clear voice was. But her husband had clearly not found this young treasure in kindergarten. She remembered how, at Ellie's birthday party, her friend had introduced them to another young lover. How her husband then fumed on the way home, saying that a large age difference was a disaster. What could you talk about? How could you spend leisure time? Then she had spent a long time calming down her agitated husband. And now? It turned out all his assurances were lies, an axiom she had once encountered in a film. Never say never. How can we know how we will behave in a given situation? Why make vows in advance? Confusion, fragments of thoughts and memories. She felt like she was going crazy from this barrage of internal reasoning. She moved even further away from her husband, although she loved waking up in his arms so much. She would scold him, saying he would break her, but his hugs did her good. She would joke that soon he wouldn't fit through the doorway because of her pies, and he would smile contentedly, pull her towards him, bury his nose in her shoulder, and growl that he loved the smell of her shampoo, as if she mixed some potion into it. This scene had happened quite recently, the morning of their silver anniversary. It turned out her philandering kitten was lying. He wanted her to remain in blissful ignorance. Why? What goals was he pursuing? She had no answers to these questions. The young woman wrinkled her nose in displeasure. What were these late-night calls from her lover? Maybe his wife woke up suddenly and interrupted their conversation. He had never bothered her so late before. Apparently, he really did miss her. She made herself a sandwich and went back to the television. Her lover often scolded her for her disordered lifestyle, sleeping during the day and staying up at night. She would roll her eyes languidly and explain for the umpteenth time that he himself had made her quit, saying that her main role was to be his beloved woman. He would take care of everything else. And what kind of job was it anyway? A junior boss over senior janitors, that pathetic office, grumpy pensioners, a pittance of a salary. She was so happy that her knight had freed his lady from this nightmare. She could convince him of anything. She was wonderfully beautiful, young and fresh, always in a good mood, brimming with ideas. Next to her, he felt something amazing. His wife didn't compare at all. He was dying of passion, ready for anything, especially when she looked at him critically and then delivered her verdict. God, you're so handsome. Would anyone say you're 45? I wouldn't give you more than 30. You're very youthful, my love. It's a miracle. We've been together for 2 years and you get better looking every day. I respect you so much, kitten. Come quickly. I've missed you. He didn't walk to her. He flew. Who cared that he was 25 years older than this girl? She couldn't be deceiving him so skillfully for so long. She was truly in love, and her feelings grew with each meeting. Surely he, who had commanded a huge team for a couple of decades, knew how to read people. They met by chance, on public transport. The man had long forgotten the last time he used a bus. But then, misfortune struck. He needed to change tires, and something broke at the car service. The mechanics advised against taking a taxi. It was only a couple of minutes' walk to the bus stop. No inconvenience, pure pleasure. Later, he often thought that on the day they first met, the stars had aligned magically. That it was a sign that this girl was his woman. He absolutely didn't want to think that he had been mistaken before. His entire life with his wife now seemed like a rehearsal before true love. The girl on the bus then gave up her seat to an old woman, smiling condescendingly. She moved to the back platform where a man with a briefcase was hovering. She wasn't naive in worldly matters. She immediately understood that this expensively dressed gentleman felt uncomfortable. When 2 seats became free, she decided to help him adapt and invited him to sit next to her. On this basis, they started talking. They both still had a long way to go. The young helper captivated him with a few phrases. "You're not very comfortable on this bus, are you? It's written on your face that you deserve a comfortable car." "And what else is written on my face, young lady?" He laughed. "Our age difference isn't that big," she countered. "You look about 30 at most, and I recently turned 18. We can almost be considered people of the same generation." He wasn't an idiot, but this lie struck his male heart dead on. It was completely dark outside when his seatmate got ready to get off. He asked to walk her to the dormitory. The girl was studying the intricacies of working in public utilities there. The man had never cheated on his wife, but here it was as if a demon had possessed him. Everything was new, unexplored. The girl twisted him around her little finger, and he reveled in it. She was cunning and experienced, having been through many guys. And here was a full-grown uncle, ready to walk on his hind legs, a faithful poodle, an expensive car, elegant clothes, fine perfume, costly accessories. A month later, he rented her a nice apartment in a new building on the outskirts. She refused a car. She was too lazy to learn the rules. The man visited his princess often, every other day. All the rest of the time she spent idly, watching TV series, channel surfing through music channels, traveling south with her friend. He didn't dare to run off abroad with his mistress. What was interesting was that the young lady didn't much like social gatherings. Therefore, the fact that they didn't go to restaurants together or appear in public didn't bother her. She was the type of woman who turns into a homebody hen over the years. Full, comfortable, and that's it. She didn't require more development. As the cat from the cartoon said, "We're well fed enough here." So, for almost 2 years, she lived happily, content with everything. But, as is often the case, suddenly happens in life. Her mother came to visit and began to teach her daughter about life. You say they've been married for almost 25 years and have sons? Maybe you should switch to a younger man? Why do you need this daddy lover? Mom, what are you saying? He's so sweet and obedient. He fulfills all my wishes. I even managed to set aside money for you. His sons are still fledglings. I've always liked older men. Her mother laughed. You'll be saying you love him madly next. The girl thought for a moment. I don't love him, but he's not repulsive either. I could live with him for a long time and have no worries. Hearing this, her mother immediately summarized. Well then, get to work. Separate him from his wife forever. You want to get your hand into his family trough, don't you? So act. To be honest, she was a little embarrassed by her mother with her village values and the airs of an unrecognized queen. In the village, she was constantly lecturing everyone, and she hadn't lost this habit in the city. But sometimes it was worth listening to her. From her, the girl, without personal experience, had learned the basics of strategy and tactics. Her implementations hadn't failed yet. Having seen her mother off, the girl seriously thought for the first time. Her mother was right. The lover didn't skimp on financial help, that was a fact. The fact that he wasn't constantly around she even liked. Who knew how they would get along? But she was only 20, and everything was easy. And in 5 years without a marriage certificate, it wouldn't be so fun. Also, she loved children very much, saw a future with a couple of cute little ones who would look at her like a goddess. She considered a family without children incomplete. And the man's time was running out. He still had to raise their children. So, no matter how you looked at it, it was time to change the balance of power. Children from his first marriage didn't count for now. She needed to catch the unfortunate lover in her net, replace the fishing rod with a love hook with a reliable official net. She began conversations with the man on this topic the next day. His reactions stunned her. He unconditionally agreed to leave his wife. He assured her that his share of the jointly acquired property would be enough for a comfortable life with his bird of paradise. She pouted resentfully, began to whine that he could have tried harder, come up with something clever so that their income after the divorce would be substantial. Had he slaved away at the enterprise for so many years for nothing? Where else could they get their hands on some money? That day, the man returned home in some confusion. He still had no doubt that this girl was the woman of his life, his prize. But he had never pocketed anything before. The girl insisted that they skim the enterprise's finances for their own benefit. By morning, a relatively easy plan for siphoning off money had been devised. The executive director was ready to implement it to secure happiness for his beloved. Time began. By morning, after a nearly sleepless night in the same bed with her husband, Anastasia had made a decision. After he left for work, she would follow him, find out where his mistress lived, observe from a distance, and only then initiate a confrontation. The morning was a carbon copy. Her husband sleepily greeted her, grabbed his phone, and disappeared with it into the bathroom. Before, she wouldn't have paid attention to such behavior. Now, she saw double meaning in all his actions. Her plans to postpone the showdown with her husband for another time failed miserably. Her husband appeared in the bedroom a couple of minutes later. He was furious. "I don't understand something. Did you take my phone last night and examine it?" She didn't have the strength to enter the inevitable conflict, but she knew how to take a hit. "Yes, I did. Moreover, I called one of the numbers. It's listed as LVN. Would you care to elaborate?" They almost never argued, living outwardly soul to soul. Both were now bewildered, choosing their words. Then her husband decided, "Annie, this had to happen sometime. You can't hide a needle in a sack. I've fallen in love with someone else. Neither of us is to blame. I can't help it. My passion for her is stronger than me. She is hotter than anything we've had. Believe me, I didn't want to hurt you." The woman was silent. What could she say? Make a scene? Shout? Beg him to stay? Absurd. She didn't know what to say. Inside was emptiness, as if her heart had been taken out and trampled. Just yesterday they were listening to toasts in their honor, and today old Annie and Kitten were on different shores of life. She cleared her throat. For some reason, she desperately wanted to ask this specific question. "Why does this friend of yours call me old lady? Was that your suggestion?" "Annie, there's a significant age difference between us. But that doesn't hinder true love." She raised her eyebrows in surprise. Wow. Her husband was habitually sharing news and feelings with her. This was the final chord in the requiem for their family. Her patience ran out. A volcano raged inside, resentment and misunderstanding brewing. Anyone but them, she thought. Even the pile of gifts lying in the living room hadn't been sorted yet. Silver boxes, bright ribbons, vases with her favorite flowers everywhere. How could she reconcile these gifts and bitter disappointment? How could she live on without the man she loved? She tried to feel the new reality with her heart. What did she feel towards her husband now? She couldn't answer. What was happening seemed like a terrible dream. She would wake up now, and it would all be over. She even thought that as soon as her husband left, she would put on her pajamas, cover herself with a blanket, and finish sleeping this sleepless night. But the intercom rang. A young woman with bright makeup appeared on the screen. When asked what she wanted, she briskly replied that her name was Veronica and they needed to talk. She hadn't expected such a move from her husband's mistress. Pressing the button, the model-like girl rushed into the fight from the threshold. "Matt told me everything. You've explained yourselves. There's nothing more to hide. Why are you looking like that?" "Yes, it happens. Men leave their wives for the women they love. It's natural." The words, "once a betrayer, always a betrayer," surfaced in Anastasia's mind. "And what does his old lady wife owe your visit? Do you have something to say? Or have you come to dance on the embers of our family hearth?" Without invitation, the girl sat down in an armchair, crossed her legs, and looked around. Then she declared, "I hope you understand that this is a divorce. Your sons are adults. There won't be any problems. We'll sort out the property, both the inheritance and your joint assets. Matthew will announce our terms later." Anastasia couldn't believe her ears. Some flighty little squirt, a gold digger, was going to dictate the terms of her divorce? Never. She wanted to get a rich man? Please, but first his wife would dot the I's and cross the T's. She practically dragged the girl out by the ear. She had such a look that Veronica suddenly cooled down, obediently clacking on her heels towards the exit. She only had enough strength to turn around and announce triumphantly, "I won't say goodbye. We'll see each other again at the divorce." She filed for divorce that same day. The sons were adults. Their presence wouldn't cause issues. But with the property, it turned out to be more complicated. She had trusted her husband so much that she had never read the documents he or her father brought for signing. They didn't generate any tricks. Everything purchased was simply registered in her name and the head of the family's name, tacitly assuming it was the right way. Seeing the whole picture, the woman clutched her head. She had never been a businesswoman, and now everything was leading to the need to increase her assets. She hadn't delved into the details. There was so much in the papers that she soon realized she would have to ask for help from her father's old friend, who had been his lawyer his whole life. The lawyer met her as if he knew she would come for help with the divorce. "So, my dear girl, have you decided to part ways with Matthew? And rightly so, no matter how long the rope, the secret will always come out. Connie, my friend, predicted that you wouldn't remain unaware of your husband's infidelity for long." Anastasia stared in astonishment at the gray-haired man with a twinkle in his eye. The question slipped out on its own. Dad knew Matthew had a mistress? The lawyer squinted. At first, there were only suspicions. Your husband started disappearing instead of going to work. Connie instructed the security to find out everything. On the day he passed away, he had just received the report with photos. He managed to pass it on to me, gave me instructions capable of securing your future. And it was with this report, which is still here in my office, that he felt unwell. He hurried home to lie down. I saw him to his car. He was pale, covered in sweat, and it was a cool day. I wasn't careful enough, Annie. I should have gone with him, but I had a meeting. But I fulfilled all his tasks. I'll show you the documents now. After a couple of minutes, the lawyer laid out the folders before her. She opened the first one and was stunned. Inside was a document titled, "Will with Conditions." The woman began to study it carefully. The papers said nothing about the property received after her father's death. It concerned other things: a villa abroad, a small house in another country, 2 apartments in a large city, a dacha in the south. The woman reread the clause. This will is to be announced only if the daughter files for divorce. If this does not happen, all property is to be transferred to the 2 grandsons in equal shares after their official marriages. It was indicated that all this would be acquired by his lawyer on his behalf. "How complicated it all is," she voiced. "Why did Dad set this up?" "Not complicated, but wise," the lawyer stated clearly. "You always adored your husband. Your union seemed strong. A solid house, cars, a dacha with your flower beds. The boys have everything too. Apartments, cars, money. Connie always said he didn't understand why you were so selfless. You flutter over the lawns like a butterfly. To pull the wool over the eyes of such a person is easy. But nobody understands that worldly goods mean nothing to you. You have a roof over your head, food on the table, loved ones. You are happy. You wouldn't take a piece out of anyone's mouth. But can you stand up for yourself financially? Will you want to? Don't judge. Real estate agents helped find the properties. I flew over, checked, everything is in place. But I didn't bother you until the time was right, as my friend instructed. I did everything as he ordered. I presented the papers only when you truly decided to divorce, so that you would have a spare oxygen tank or a substantial nest egg. Annie, you should also order a financial audit at your father's enterprise. The controlling stake belongs to you. Your husband only has 20%. These young mistresses are predators, like sharks. Sensing prey, they try to get everything. After the divorce, it would be good to find out the true state of affairs at the enterprise under your faithful husband's supervision. It's unlikely to avoid court. It was already clear that her husband and his mistress would fight for every penny and every inch of land. What do they say? All's fair in love and war. She was ready for any battle, even stopped whining inside. Something within her had frozen into a piece of ice. If someone had told Matthew that for beautiful eyes he would undermine the enterprise he had dedicated 20 years to, he would have spat in that person's face. But the girl was like a wild animal. She wouldn't let him near, wouldn't give him compliments if some process slowed down. Never before would he have reported to a woman. But she was his everything. Without her, he breathed differently. He wasn't living, just waiting for the next meeting. He found it difficult to lie in bed with his wife, constantly afraid of calling her by another name. But it was too early to leave home. He had to appease his wife, celebrate the anniversary, be a good boy. On the day he started his schemes, he set a deadline for how long to stay with his unloved wife and dream of his beloved girl. She called his wife the aging old lady. After talking to his mistress at work, all he did was torment his subordinates. He introduced a system of fines for the slightest transgression. He yelled at one, and that one, to avoid losing his bonus, tormented those below him. Recently, while inspecting the workshops, he witnessed a scene. One worker had done something wrong, a trifle, just a delayed defect. The workshop foreman swore at him. The worker, wiping sweat, hissed through his teeth, "Go to hell! You've turned the factory into a poorhouse. What, is every gopher an agronomist? Who's going to work, dear bosses?" People were quitting in droves. The HR department was struggling, trying to keep the core staff. Rumors spread through the city that everything at the enterprise was going haywire. And this was besides the fact that her husband had started siphoning off money under plausible pretexts. He didn't know what he was doing, couldn't stop. The goal was to lower the share price as much as possible, so he could later buy the controlling stake from his wife, or at least another 31% to add to his 20. Matthew soberly understood that after the divorce, his share of the jointly acquired property would be small. And he wasn't entirely a scoundrel. He would share with his sons, whom he loved, and provide for their future. What would be left for the girl's ambitions was almost nothing. But owning the plant, deciding the fate of profits, that was a different matter. He could quickly repair the damage and be back at the helm of the giant. Anastasia, at that moment, still far from the realities of production, was poring over another project. She sat for hours at the computer with Ellie, arranging flowers and greenery next to stone installations. It didn't occur to her to be interested in her father's company's affairs. It was enough that her husband almost lived at work. She was a delicate woman. It was better to ponder over flower arrangements. Then came the pleasant preparations for the anniversary, the fuss, the trips to shops and salons. Did she think then that she was moving by leaps and bounds towards the end of a happy marriage? No, of course not. After visiting the lawyer, she was again in turmoil. She linked her father's death and her husband's behavior, which led to the breakup. She scolded herself for being so absorbed in her creative impulses that she wasn't observant, didn't notice the obvious. She didn't even immediately realize she was drawing different varieties of orchids, and then cutting them into pieces with scissors. One thought circled in her head: I will never use this type of flower in my projects again. An exquisite orchid is capable of wounding the soul with a hidden meaning. The orchid came and took her husband away. It's a lie that beauty saves the world. It is saved by warmth and sincerity. No one would succeed in shaking her belief in this. By the evening of the catastrophic day, both of them understood they couldn't stay under the same roof. Anastasia wandered through the huge house, thinking she couldn't live there after the divorce. It was too painful to look around. The collection of family photos alone was something. Her eyes fell upon them in the pictures, but she had no desire to destroy them. They were a part of her sons. She would tell them about the impending changes, about the possible court case, later. She was afraid of their sharp reaction, of her children's condemnation, who would call their father a scoundrel and her incompetent, unable to keep a man. She leafed through the pages of the past. Again. Where was the mistake? A fatal coincidence, or was everything predetermined? She thought of her father with warmth again. How upset he would be to learn about the inevitability of the separation. He seemed to respect her husband, didn't he? Or did he pretend? She suddenly remembered. The lawyer had advised her to order an audit of her father's enterprise, and she hadn't done anything. She didn't have the necessary connections in that field. She would have to turn to her ubiquitous friend again, and at the same time, tell her about the changes in her personal life. Ellie was probably burning with impatience. Had she managed to find out anything about her husband's strange conversation? She called Ellie. An hour later, they were drinking wine in the garden, discussing the perfidy of the frivolous girl, her greed and impudence. She instructed that the results of the audit at the enterprise should not be announced for now. She already knew her husband had turned out to be a scoundrel. Yes, Ellie, as usual, had been busy. A close friend helped organize a total audit. He worked in the relevant authorities, helped keep the matter out of court until the trial, which had already been scheduled. This was within his competence. Anastasia was as calm as a boa constrictor. She was well prepared for the meeting with her husband and the new love of his life. The lawyer hadn't been idle either. He had meticulously sorted through all the papers left by his friend. In the process, he smiled more than once. Oh, what a cunning fox my unforgettable Connie was. He had drawn up property documents 100 times, an epic with papers, and also slipped a prenuptial agreement to his son-in-law. And his daughter's signature was on it. He needed to call her, find out if she was aware that in case of proven infidelity, the spouse loses all rights to joint property. The lawyer thought again. With my beloved, paradise is in a hut. But the beloved was unlikely to agree to a hut. The lawyer was concerned that the court might declare the prenuptial agreement or the infidelity clause void. The man would still get his seemingly legal half of the assets. In a phone conversation, Anastasia confidently confirmed that she was aware of the prenuptial agreement. When her father prepared it with the lawyers, she was so engrossed in a project on the coast that she signed the document on the go, without reading it, fully trusting her father and husband, who were present. The lawyer was somewhat taken aback. So, her husband also knew about the contract. What a strange family they were after all. They signed documents without looking, trusted each other for a time, and then sacrificed everything on the altar of a new passion. Wondrous are your deeds, love. You know how to rob people of their minds effortlessly. The girl stoically endured the man's presence in the apartment, and there were several reasons for that. Firstly, the trial was only a couple of weeks away. Secondly, the pregnancy test showed a positive result. She could be considered empty-headed, she didn't reach for the stars, was a bit primitive by the standards of advanced society. But one thing couldn't be taken away from her: a strong maternal instinct. She already dreamed that they would marry, live in abundance, and she would endure the rest. She had learned to play at love. There were no failures. Before sleep, falling asleep on her almost husband's shoulder, she devised how she would deliver the stunning news. "Kitten, how am I like a chipmunk?" He would start playing along, knowing that anything could be expected from her imagination. She would then deliver triumphantly. "You didn't guess. I'm a chipmunk because I also have 2 stripes on a test now. Darling, we're having a baby." She squeezed her eyes shut. She imagined how her husband would carry her in his arms, shower her with gifts, buy a new maternity wardrobe, provide a trousseau for the baby from elite stores. She would need to talk to him about kicking his wife out of their house. A complete family should move into those luxurious rooms. It wasn't right for the baby to grow up in cramped conditions. The unsuspecting man, on the contrary, prayed to heaven that the girl wouldn't get pregnant. He was already quite old. He could do without Kinder Surprise. He had 2 sons. That was enough to satisfy his paternal feelings. They were so good together. It was better that he would pamper and cherish her. The man had no doubt that the divorce case would end in his triumph. He knew his wife was a decent, kind-hearted person who would generously share all the assets, even though he had betrayed her. She must understand that love doesn't ask when to strike. She also had the enterprise. He just needed to tell the girl to behave decently during the trial. Anastasia sat in the courtroom, looking around the full room. Behind her, Ellie supported her, whispering impressions. Next to Ellie sat her friend silently, waiting for the command, "Attack." Judging by her husband's satisfied face, embracing the girl, he didn't expect any surprises. Anastasia decided. Any court session was tedious. Although the judge studied the materials beforehand, questions arose. And now, the agenda was announced, the participants introduced. Her husband even wondered what all this circus was for. But then the lawyer took the floor. He informed the court that during the preparation of the documents, a number of additional circumstances had come to light. He placed copies before the judge, asking permission to explain. He read aloud to everyone the prenuptial agreement, the will with conditions. At the end, he added that regarding the husband, there were questions from competent authorities after a secret inspection. At these words, the judge nodded understandingly. The ground gave way under Matthew's feet. The girl clung to his sleeve, whispering hotly, "I don't understand. We won't get anything? We'll be left with nothing? I'm pregnant." Her lover looked at her with glassy eyes. While the court retired for deliberation, Ellie's friend, sitting at a distance, mockingly showed him a keychain in the shape of handcuffs. The husband understood the hint. He calmed down. He didn't care anymore that after the separation, he would be left with nothing, and his wife would become richer. He would clearly be going to prison for a long time. He was lucky if he wasn't arrested right in the courtroom. His wife won, and he suffered a fiasco. The girl sitting next to him buzzed, accusing him of all sins. And he speculated, maybe this girl didn't love him? She loved money, was happy with gifts. Most likely, she flattered him, pursuing her goal. Matthew flinched. Did the girl say something about pregnancy? Or did he mishear? That was all he needed now. To be left without money even for diapers. And would she wait for him for several years? He glanced at his princess, whose heart was admiring her manicure, done specially for court. Amazing carelessness and the habit of him taking care of everything. Had she already forgotten everything she heard? Did she think the judge would announce the decision now? Everything would fall into place, and she would leave a rich young lady? Matthew barely listened to what the judge was reading. He only understood that after the divorce and division of property, he was left with practically nothing. The girl remained in speechless infantilism. She understood that this wasn't a court decision, but a verdict on all her hopes. One thought pounded in the girl's head. Whatever happens, I won't get rid of the baby now. Even if Matthew has trouble, I'll do everything myself for the little one. She said nothing aloud. Yes, perhaps no one, seeing her pretty face, would have thought she took motherhood so seriously. Sometimes emptiness only seems empty. Anastasia left the courtroom satisfied. She already knew her husband would be arrested tomorrow on fraud charges. Did she feel sorry for him and the girl? Strangely, she did. She wasn't vengeful. She only wanted justice. Even her heart had stopped aching so much. She wanted to return to her sketches, drown in flowers, forget herself. But not to seek revenge. For a second, it even seemed to her that the statue of Themis had removed her blindfold and winked at her, approving her thoughts. And she also remembered her lawyer's favorite phrase, "The law is harsh, but it is the law." Anastasia and Ellie sat in the garden, sipping wine, chatting. Their grown grandchildren were playing on the lawn. Ellie grumbled, "Annie, I understand the dacha in the south is huge. You're bored alone. I approve of you taking the grandchildren for the summer. But why are you dragging Veronica's daughter to your place too? That smells of absurdity." Anastasia raised her eyes to Ellie, squinted, adjusted her headband. "Ellie, Veronica is now a mother and wife to Matthew. She travels to see him in prison, sends parcels. I didn't think that would surprise me so much. It won't hurt me. My sons and their families live comfortably. What else is there to wish for in life? Everything turned out as it did. It's just a pity that Matthew decided to show character. He was rude to the authorities in the colony about something. To miss the chance of parole. Sometimes I feel like I didn't know my husband well. I was flying under creative clouds, and he was treading sinful earth. Veronica was able to see something else in him. Look, she gave birth to his child. She's studying by correspondence, will get her diploma soon, and will wait for Matthew's return. I'm sure of it. Ellie conspiratorially hooted. Well, my friend, the court is clear on everything. I won't tease and ask what gentleman was circling the fence yesterday. It shows. That's your new close friend. I approve 100%. A very imposing man. And judging by his outfit, he's also one of us, from the creative crowd. Anastasia immediately threw a peach pit at her curious friend. My life here has begun to acquire new meaning. I don't want to scare it away, so I'm not talking about it yet. I promise, you'll be the first one to wish me luck with the new man. Let happiness settle next to me again.